which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akimel O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Okay, today's meeting will begin with a question and answer with Dr. Menzel. If you have any more questions, please send them my way on an index card. And then we're going to hear about parent volunteering from Alexis Wilson and Amy Goff from Human Resources. And we'll end with some executive board updates and any announcements from representatives, like we usually do. Okay, so Q&A. Does anyone else have any additional questions? All right. Will AVID be rolled out beyond Arcadia and Coronado learning communities?
That's a fair question. As of the present time, I don't expect that AVID will grow beyond those two. We've got the IB continuum in the Desert Mountain High School Learning Complex, and so looking at what programming provides unique opportunities for students is important. At the same time, there's a cost associated with it, so it's a balancing act. We have some schools that were previously AVID schools that are applying the principles without formally participating, and so those principles are transferable. And at least as of now, I don't think that it'll extend beyond those two learning communities.
What is AVID?
Advancement via individual determination. It's Coronado and Arcadia. What is it? It really is focused on helping students have the tools and skill sets necessary to not only be successful as they're moving through their coursework, from note-taking and some of the other strategies that help prepare them for college and career. And so AVID has intentional strategies with respect to doing those kinds of things, starting at the elementary level with a clear focus on being prepared for college and career. So they do a lot of intentional things. If you were at any number of our schools, they'll have College Wednesdays. Everybody's wearing spirit gear. You're getting students thinking about what their future is and how their learning applies to that future, and taking ownership of their own learning.
A couple years ago when I was first hearing about it at Copper Ridge, I looked into it, and it was mostly meant for catch-up, like for with learning gaps in communities that have probably achievement gaps. And so perhaps, can you explain more if that's one of the reasons why they're not continuing?
From my perspective, and I'm not the expert in AVID, but we've not approached it as a catch-up or remediation. It really is about creating college-going culture and climate. People understand what it takes to move beyond high school completion to envision a future that prepares them for whatever it is that they want to pursue after high school, and developing strategies as they're going through coursework, focused note-taking. How do you know that you're actually processing the information that's being taught in a way that helps you remember and be able to build on that learning for the future? So it really has strategies that are transferable related to college and career readiness. So they may already be implementing many of those strategies, and so it wouldn't be necessary, could be redundant, but this is a very intentional approach, and for the school districts that have implemented it, there's research that supports the improved outcomes for students as a result of following those strategies.
Does it show where you have to be in order to get those achievements? So, for example, for a community like Copper Ridge, is it kind of not worth the effort?
So I wouldn't say that I think it's a mixed bag. Those strategies are applicable regardless of whether you're at Copper Ridge or Coronado. The issue is, in some cases, those strategies may already be embedded and you don't have to be a part of a formal program. When you commit to being part of the AVID program, they have training for the teachers, they've got curricular supports that are implemented, so it's a bit more specific and prescribed in order to produce those outcomes. You can still get there without it being prescribed. Over here at Mojave, former principal said, we were an AVID school, we're not anymore. I would call us AVID Light because we're still implementing some of those practices, but we're not following all of the script that is provided if you are a formal part of the AVID program.
Okay, next question is, with ESSER and results-based funding no longer available, what cuts will SUSD be making going forward?
So the budget process is ongoing. Information's been provided at several governing board meetings with respect to the adjustments that are made as a result of the elimination of ESSER funding and the non-renewal of results-based funding. One of the things that we've talked about regularly is the right sizing that's taking place. So the district has established class size ratios. And so when you look at staffing across our buildings, the enrollment that we have, ensuring that we're getting closer to those ratios. When we had ESSER funding, and even during the pandemic, there was an intentional effort to reduce class sizes to create social distancing. You might remember some of the terminology from then. At this point, when you're looking at a reduction in available funding, when you right size, you can address some of those concerns. We've been able to accomplish almost all of the planned right sizing to address the budgetary constraints through attrition. So the board hasn't been asked to approve reduction in force yet. Doesn't mean that there won't be any layoffs, but those will be limited and probably very small in scale compared to what some of our neighbors have experienced, because through attrition we've been able to manage much of that. So we have anticipated the reduction of ESSER, or the fact that we won't have that after September 30th of this year, and results-based funding, and have adjusted the budget accordingly.
Okay, this question is, are interest-based negotiations ongoing? And then I'll also ask, what are interest-based negotiations?
So yes, interest-based negotiations are ongoing. We have some, I'm going to set this cup down. We have some, I can't talk without my hands. We have some timelines that needed to be met with respect to the financial part of interest-based negotiations, and so that gets moved up on the front end. But interest-based negotiations is an approach to meet and confer in the state of Arizona. In other states, it would be collective bargaining, but we don't really have collective bargaining in the sense that some other union states do. But it's a commitment on the part of the governing board to engage with our associations in conversations about compensation and working conditions. And so there are 3 separate associations right now: the Scottsdale Administrators Association, the Education Association, and the Support Professional Association. Those groups come to the table with representatives from the management team to talk about our shared interest. So in conventional bargaining, it's positional. I want this, we have this, you fight over whatever you can get, and then at the end of the day, the governing board makes the decision. So in the state of Arizona, the board ultimately controls all the power. In other places, collective bargaining has more teeth to it, in terms of you could have a process where you got to impasse and you'd go through a whole process for how do you get to resolution. Here, ultimately, the governing board gets to make the determination. This board has made a commitment to working with our associations through the IBN process to identify what our shared interests are and how we can get there. The financial component was moved on the front end of the conversation because we have to make budgetary decisions, and we needed to get contracts out to our certified staff before spring break. So that part is essentially complete, although there are other components that can still be considered. But from a compensation perspective for next year, much of the work has been done. There are still some other things that can be considered, and those are being discussed at the IBN table with the 3 separate associations.
Okay, now that there is no longer an automatic presumption of exemption from licensure with the Board of Behavioral Examiners for school counselors or school social workers in Arizona, what changes can we expect to see in terms of what they do as part of SUSD's intervention counseling and the multi-tiered support services being provided by the district?
So I can't say that there'll be any changes. We'll continue to work with legal counsel and others to ensure that we're in compliance with Arizona statutes and the requirements that we have. But ultimately, our social workers and school counselors are there to support our students in being able to navigate the school environment successfully, and we'll continue to provide support for each and every student.
Okay, last question is, what are the findings on the Auditor General's report?
So the Auditor General every year does a school finance report, and they've done it for at least a couple of decades now, I think. And the high-level summary of the audit report is that unlike other districts in the state, Scottsdale has shown an increase in our investment in classroom expenditures. The total amount was over 71%, I think, and a decrease in our administrative costs, a decrease in our plant expenditures. Historically, over time, over the last 5 years, you've seen that we've increased investment in the classroom and decreased admin and plant expenditures. That's the last 5 years. There was an interesting note that in 2004, we had 63.7% or something spent on classroom instruction. So a little historical digging, and we will provide this information, so I'm going to do it as much as I can from memory. The reason why in 2004 those numbers were so high is that there were things that were inappropriately coded to classroom expenditures. And that included electricity costs. That included some other facility costs, things that, according to the chart of accounts, should not have been put into classroom expenditures. And in, I think, 2012, the Auditor General called out the historical practices of Scottsdale Unified to code things to classroom expenditures that were not properly coded there. So it's not as though the district was spending 63% actually on classroom instruction. It was inappropriately coding certain things to classroom instruction, which inflated that number. That was called out in the 2012 report. And so I think that's really important to balance it. When you look at our performance vis-a-vis our competitors in the state, the Auditor General's report continues to show that Scottsdale Unified outperforms our peers and it outperforms the state on academic indicators, on our compensation for employees, and in terms of our investment in the classroom. So overall, it was a very positive report.
Okay, thank you. Those
Thank
are our
you.
questions.
I guess so.
So are you aware of the board, the Mental Health Examiners Board, the state board, has no longer accepting the certification from the Board of Education for social workers and counselors, and that now, as a result that was a result of a submission to the board, I think it was some 100 pages, which included the job description of a social worker from SUSD. So now it's a felony for somebody to diagnose or treat a mental condition, okay, and that's now a felony according to the state board without proper licensing. So has that information been conveyed, and is it being conveyed to the counselors and the social workers? How are they going to understand what that is? Because apparently the board felt that's why they suspended that 20-year policy of what they called it, I think it was no touch or hands off, something like that, of just accepting the Board of Education certification, which they no longer do.
So I haven't seen any formal communication from the Board of Examiners, so I will need to check and see if anyone within our social worker counseling department has received anything that way. So I can't answer the question. I don't know if they've received formal communication from the Board of Examiners, so I'll have to look into that.
Okay, well, when they suspended the policy, I forwarded it to Dr. Benson, and she said she was going to distribute that.
And I'm sure that if she said she was going to, she did.
Well, and recently they've just codified it in terms of the AAR where they published it, and it's under ARS Title 32.
If you can send me what you have, I would appreciate that, Mike.
Okay, because like I said, people are at risk of being charged with a felony if they step over the line without proper licensing.
Thank you.
And I do believe that our social workers and counselors are not diagnosers of any mental or conditions.
That's correct.
To be clear.
Okay, so in the interest of Dr. Menzel's time, we're going to move forward with the meeting. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
And up next on the agenda, we're going to hear from Alexis Wilson and Amy Goff about volunteering and how to get on campus in our district.
Thank you, and thank you for having us this morning. We're going to have, Ray's going to bring up our presentation, but we first want to say for those of you that are, thank you, volunteering or even visiting classrooms as parents, we really appreciate that. I know the teachers certainly do, and the school site administration. So we're going to go over, everything that we're going to present today is also information that is in a packet that Amy is passing out and on our website, but we're hoping to hit the highlights and then answer any questions that you all may have about volunteering in SUSD. It is low? Oh, I have to put it right here. Okay. So we're going to tag team our presentation. This is my colleague, Amy Goff. She's the Director of Human Resources for Classified.
Morning.
So first of all, if you are interested in volunteering or even visiting a classroom, there's a lot of information on our website. So you just go to susd.org, click on the tab that says departments, then go to human resources, and on the left-hand side, you'll see volunteers and chaperones. So all of the information is on that website, the guidelines, the background affidavit form, the application, and then some frequently asked questions. You can also look under the jobs link here and just type in volunteer, and it'll take you directly to the application to be a volunteer. So this, we wanted to define what a visitor versus a volunteer, because this gets confused quite a bit, and we want to clarify for everybody here, because you don't always need to apply to be a volunteer. So a visitor is an individual who is coming to visit the school. Typically, it's a parent coming, you know, if there's some performance, or you're there to help out for one particular event, a fun run, a party, whatever it may be, parent-teacher conferences, some other meeting that you might have. You're visiting the campus. So we want to make that distinction. You don't have to apply to go visit the classroom of your child. You do have to sign in at the front office. And I'm not sure, did you all sign in out front here, or probably not? Well, you signed in this room, but now you also know when you go into the schools, there's some of the schools have a kiosk where you can sign in and badge in as a parent as well. The difference between the visitor and the volunteer, a volunteer is someone that's there on campus for a regularly scheduled period of time. So if you are there every day, Monday through Friday, for the whole day, volunteering to help out in the office, then you would need to apply to be a volunteer. So it's regular interaction, not just these one-off events that happen at the school campus. So for example, and a lot of times this happens more with community volunteers, the people that are outside of the organization. So if we have some support from outside organizations, they need to apply to volunteer in our classrooms, and they have a specific process that they're going to go through. But again, sometimes as a parent, if you're there on a regular basis, you may also have to go through that process. I'm going to turn it over to Amy to actually talk about the process, because she helped put this well, she didn't help, she did at the presentation, so may as well give her all the credit. So, all right, you have a microphone?
All right, good morning. Were any of you cleared to be volunteers in the 22-23 school year? Sorry to you guys. So we had some guidelines right after COVID to get everybody back in the door. And in that 22-23 school year, is this on? I know I have a loud voice, but I don't know if this is on or not. So in that 22-23 school year, we had a huge backlog of volunteers for so many reasons. So we took a look at the process again this year for the 23-24 school year and streamlined it. As of right now, and for the last, I think, 4 or 5 months, we have had no backlog of volunteers. So if you apply to be a volunteer, it will get processed in the timeline I'll talk about in a second. So if you are a parent or legal guardian and you want to volunteer at the site, all you have to do is go to our website and fill out an application. Most likely, if you're filling out that application, you've talked to the teacher or the front office and said, I want to be a volunteer. So that front office will put you on their list. They'll look for your application. Once that application is in, you are cleared as a site volunteer if you're a parent. So same process then, you would sign in the front office and you get a badge. That's it? Yes. Right. So the site volunteer is a parent or legal guardian, and it has to be at the school that they're volunteering at. Most of the time, they're in the classroom, they're in the site of certified. Sometimes they're not. But most of the time, they're at the school, they're around others, they're in site of certified.
Typically, those folks are in the front office and also still around staff. They could be in the copy machine room up there, but not necessarily alone with students throughout the day. If how many of you have badged in or signed in with your driver's license at the front? So there is a check that happens through your driver's license. So they're looking for it runs it through a national database to check for any. No, which for or chaperone, right? Yeah, we'll.
There's different layers. So the background check that we run when you all go on a field trip, when parents and guardians go on a field trip, that's a button we push. It checks at least 7 years back, sometimes more, and it does the criminal, the statewide, the U.S. criminal check. That's if you're chaperoning on a field trip. So all chaperones, and we'll get to the chaperones in a second. The site volunteers right now, we're not background checking if they're a parent or legal guardian. There is a state statute that kind of governs how we make our processes. And that state statute says if someone is not a parent or legal guardian, then they must be fingerprinted, shall be fingerprinted. If they're not, then it's kind of up to us what we want to do. So we do present this to our principals and our secretaries, and when we present to them, we tell them the process and the fact that if someone's on their campus, they should be in the supervision of a certified staff. When we say may not, we are aware that sometimes there's a reading group pulled in the library maybe. Some libraries have LRSs, which are classified. So they may be in sight of a classified employee, but not necessarily a certificated employee. And that statute specifically says certificated employees for our non-parents and legal guardians. So when we say they may be out of sight, it's not like we want them to be roaming around with kids. It's like if you pull a reading group next door, we're aware that that could happen. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
We've
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think that it's that terminology, right, that gets confusing. So I'm here to help out with the fun run. I don't have to go through the application. You're a parent, legal guardian, and that is okay. And you sign in the front office. You're there among staff, watching kids run around and supervised. Right. So I think, the volunteer term is used loosely in that situation, but it's really you're a visitor for that event or that particular day or whatever it may be. And there may be another fun run or another event next month, but you're still visiting for the purpose of that event. Right, yeah, no. Yeah. So
That's definitely confusing too, because if you're looking for people to help at a fun run, you're not going to say, we need visitors to help at the fun run. So I get what you're.
That would sound really awkward.
I
too.
get what you're saying. So we've tried to train the schools to train parents Here's what a visitor is. They're just in and out for a day, and here's what a volunteer is. But yeah, and then it's a little bit muddied because a lot of times people that visit or volunteer a lot, it's frequent. So then you consider yourself a volunteer. Honestly, the volunteer application is not that long. We streamlined it a little bit. So it wouldn't hurt to just fill out the volunteer application. You don't have to anymore. Unless you're on
Field.
an out-of-town field trip.
Which we're going to get to, and there's a question here, and then we'll move on to that.
When we are running a background check, we absolutely need the social security number to run the background check. So, yes. We. So, based on what I know, and we can look into it, I believe the company that we use require.
Right.
Well,
It all resides in the Human Resources Department, and only individuals in that area have access to it. So it is protected. We have.
Well,
No?
I think definitely, yeah, we can look into the social, but you can visit, you can be at a conference, you can be at a fun run, you can go to the school without filling out the application. So it's really up to you if you want to give us your information. You're just cleared at a bit higher level. So you're not required to fill out the application to be at your kid's school.
And just to piggyback on that, I think the most important thing is if you're going on an overnight field trip, we want to make sure that we have individuals that are cleared to be around students. And so that is our number one priority, is to make sure that we're ensuring the safety for our students and our staff. So that's the. Okay. All right.
Can you go back one?
Oh.
So non-parent and legal guardians at the site are required to have the full clearance. So when we say full clearance, what that means is they complete the application. We start the background check in HR. The background check that we start in HR is not fingerprinting. That's an electronic background check. And that usually takes about 2 or 3 days if there's no issues. Sometimes somebody's lived in multiple states. They may have a criminal background. In that case, it could take a bit longer, up to a week or 2, but most of the time those background checks are real quick. We do, for non-parent legal guardians, based on that statute I talked about, we do require them to come into our office and get fingerprinted. So that fingerprinting is what takes a long time. That's not run through us, that's run through DPS. So that could take, we say, up to 8 weeks. I actually looked at the website and it said a lot quicker, but we should stick to the get cleared 8 weeks before you want to volunteer. No, there's not. So we don't charge our volunteers. Yeah, there's a cost for us. And then there was a question we received about an IVP card. IVP cards, some of you may actually have if you've worked in a school district before or worked somewhere that requires a fingerprint card. We do take those in lieu of fingerprinting. So if somebody actually has, there's a difference and people get really confused. So the one-time fingerprint is done for an entity. So if you come to us for a one-time fingerprint, we can't share that with somewhere else that may want to fingerprint you. That's just for us. The IVP card is yours. It's a card for 6 years. You would have to pay for it because it's yours. That's $67, but some people come to us with those cards already, so we don't make them get fingerprinted. We take their fingerprint card. We do it in our office for the one-time print. So we're at 7575 East Main Street, the Education Center. And I do have a slide later on. I don't know exactly when we offer it, but it's on a slide coming up, so the times are there. If you want to get your own IVP card, you apply through the DPS website, and then there's sites all over the place that will do your fingerprinting. UPS stores, it's like live scan places, so there's a lot of different places if you want to actually get a card.
You want me to
Anything
talk
else
about?
to add?
Nope.
Okay. Chaperones. So chaperones are people attending a field trip. And these are our parents, step-parents. We let grandparents go on field trips. And sometimes that may be situational to, somebody's raised by an aunt or something. We're not going to be like, no, aunt, you can't go. But those are the 4 that we say are allowed to go on a field trip. Let's just do in-town field trips first for anyone, parents, non-parents, everyone. Complete an application. Then you're going to tell the school, well, usually the school tells us. They give us a list of the chaperones. So we'll start the background check. We have a Google Doc that communicates with schools, and that Google Doc is updated pretty much daily. So your main contact as parents to see where you are in the clearance process is your school secretary. They have access to this Google Doc, and it's a Google Doc, so it's a live document. Anytime we update something, they can see it. And every school has their own tab on the Google Doc that feeds from our master. So if somebody's background check clears, we put a note in there, background check cleared 320. Then the school should be able to tell you the background checks cleared 320. We don't have information that the school doesn't have in regards to where you are in the process. So always check with your admin support first. We would love to be able to take all the calls, but with 30 schools, it's really hard for our department to field all that, so that's why we train the secretaries and give them all the information. So those daytime trips, application, you're gonna want someone aware that you're going on that field trip. Most of the time it comes from the teacher. They say, do you want a chaperone? You say yes, and then they give the names to the secretary. Once your background check is cleared, you're good to go on a daytime trip.
So they gave the names to the secretary, and then the secretary look at the list and say, none of these people have filled out the application. We need to go back and tell them to do that, and then you'll, is that the process?
Yeah, so, okay, I'll go slower. So the school say, I want these 4 people, let's just go light here, to go on the field trip. The secretary can do a quick control find, see if those people have applied or not. I think in most cases, I'm not going to say for sure, the secretary would let you know, like, you need to fill out an application. If not, we're trying to educate people. You need to fill out an application, trying to get principals and secretaries to educate teachers, let your parents know they have to apply. But we're hopeful that that comes from someone. So what the secretary does to alert us, they fill out a little Google form with your names on it. So if they put in Kimberly wants to go on the trip, that Google form shoots right into our master spreadsheet. So we see Kimberly, and then we can check, has Kimberly applied? Does Kimberly have a background check? Because your stuff is good for 3 years. We check the Google Doc every single day, and we move them to different tabs. So there's like in progress, there's cleared. So if and the secretary should check, is Kimberly already cleared? If Kimberly is already cleared, she's not going to re-enter the name. If she's not, she'll send the little Google form. We see it on the new tab, and then we start our process. So that feeds into the sheet. Once they're in process, that's how we communicate with the secretary. So when we run the background check, we'll put a note in that sheet that says background check started 3/19. When the background check clears, we'll put a note in there that says background check cleared 3/20. And if it clears, we'll move you to, let's say you're at Desert Canyon, we'll move you to Desert Canyon's master tab as a cleared chaperone. You don't have to. We check for applications. So if your name's on the sheet, on the Google sheet, we'll check to see if your application's in our system. Usually if we're talking chaperones here, usually the chaperone list comes from the teacher. So the teacher will give this, and we have a whole field trip portal that we're not going to get into today. But usually either they'll submit through that portal or the secretary will do it. So if you're going to go on a field trip, you don't have to like call us and say, I'm going check for my application. We know through the communication with the school that you're going. And then they should be able to see where you are in the process.
It wouldn't hurt to say, check in if you have applied and say, hey, have I been cleared for the field trip? But I think, yeah.
Well, and check on it if you haven't heard anything. Like my right. So and I think a lot of times the secretary doesn't call and say, "Hey, you're cleared." So you can call and check where am I in the status.
Yeah. It's sort of like making sausage. You don't really want to know what's happening in the background, but there is a method to the madness. But to your point, I mean, there's so many parts of it that have to occur because you got to get a bus, you got to get chaperones, you got to communicate with the place you're going, and what is the student to teacher ratio, because the Science Center has different expectations than the Musical Instrument Museum. And so it is good to know in advance, and for teachers, so I would agree, starting with the teachers and the secretaries is probably a really good idea, because correct. Yep. Right. You are now hired and can work in the volunteer process. Yeah, we're
3 years. Yeah. See, that's where I don't want to misspeak. I think a lot of some schools do it differently. But most schools, like when I want to know something, I go to my kid's teacher, and they know the field trip process, and they can check with secretaries. They know that. So I think that's the norm. But then there's a few exceptions to the norm. But I agree, just do it early. And so if you're going on a daytime field trip, we just run a background check through our portal. So that's about a week or two, I would say, in advance. And like somebody said, those field trips are usually put in well ahead of time. Sometimes the ball's dropped and it's a rush, but the background checks are coming back fairly quickly, again, unless there's an issue or you have a criminal background or you've lived in like 5 different states, then it could take longer. Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next piece is who to contact, and we've just talked a little bit about that. So really, I think your main point of contact, right, is at the site level, both with the front office admin support and then the teacher as well. So teachers know they want to plan in advance for field trips. So to your point, a really good idea is go ahead and fill out the application and get in front of it. And then we have our HR contacts. So in the Human Resources Department, we have specialists that are assigned to learning communities who support this work and communicate with the school admins, not just for their employee stuff, but also through this. So their contact information is up there. Alyssa Martin is our, I don't know her exact admin support, thank you, in the HR department, so you can reach out to her as well. But again, first point of contact, first point of contact is at your school site level.
We missed overnight field trips.
Oh, sorry. I
It's
thought
okay. Trying to skip my process.
I thought we did.
Overnight field trips are the ones where you do need a fingerprint check or an IVP card. So if you have an IVP card, it's fast. You submit that IVP card to your application, and we receive it with your application. If you need fingerprints, then that's where you come to our office, and we have that on the FAQ slide in a minute. But those you want to plan well in advance. I've been telling secretaries, principals, if somebody knows in 4th grade there's a Grand Canyon trip, those parents are going to know they want to go on that Grand Canyon trip so they can come in and get fingerprinted. They do need to tell the site first because we fingerprint when we're told to. So tell the site, I'm going to the Grand Canyon, I'm going to need fingerprints. They'll put you on the list because those fingerprints can take up to 8 weeks. So you don't want to miss out on an overnight field trip because of that. Overnights, and if it's a non-legal guardian, then they need fingerprints for an overnight trip. The background check is for daytime trips. It should specify overnight. For daytime, correct, unless you know you're going on an overnight, you're right, yeah. And we do need to hear from the school, yes.
We want to make sure that the parent who says they're a parent is a parent and not, you don't have somebody walk into our office and we don't know that they're actually parents.
And then we did get a question about the notarized criminal affidavit. We only do that if you're being fingerprinted, and we have those in our office, and we have you fill that out when you're in our office. So that's if you're doing a one-time fingerprint, then you fill out that criminal affidavit, and that's in our office.
And we have notaries, so
That's only if you need fingerprints done. We got a list of questions, and the criminal affidavit was on there, so. Yeah, for an overnight,
Correct.
you would need that if you're getting fingerprinted. Yes, yes. So don't worry about it. You're good. It's a one-stop shop over in HR.
Thank you.
Don't spread that around, though. We don't need a line like we had last year.
Yeah, when everyone came. Right.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I jumped ahead. Sorry.
You're good.
You're good?
You're good.
All right, so we went over this slide already. These are the names of the humans in the Human Resource Department. They were lovely individuals willing to help out. And then some of these questions we've already answered, but we'll just touch on them real quick. We've talked about the one-time fingerprint versus the IVP fingerprint clearance card. Our address is there. We're not in this building. We're at 7575 East Main Street. You can walk over to the lovely park across the street after you get fingerprinted. The times are Wednesday 1 to 3 and Thursday 9 to noon. Sorry about the typo in there. There's no cost for a one-time print for you all. And do I need an HR badge?
No.
Thank you. Processing time, we talked about how long it takes for the fingerprint in the background. So again, if you're planning to go on an overnight, you definitely want to get in front of that early on. And then you have 3 years once you're cleared as a volunteer. Yes. To get fingerprinted? if you could come in during these times, that's the time, because we have other events that happen in HR, like we have orientations on Tuesdays, we have to process those. So those times that are up there are the times we're available. And again, as Amy mentioned, you can also do that on your own. Usually UPS is doing it. There's live scan fingerprinting services available. If you Google where can I get fingerprinted, it used to be the police departments do that. I don't think they do that anymore, and so don't tell them I said that they did. I didn't say that. They used to, but I think they stopped doing that a while ago. So, and then I think that's it. So we again appreciate your support of our students. Ah, thank you. Yeah, well, we've tried to improve and streamline the process, and we have a full staff now too, so that helps as well. And we didn't have the COVID rush return of people wanting to get back in. So thank you. Anything else?
We usually see the opposite problem when they rush into our office.
Yeah. I think you just, obviously sharing the good word and teachers sharing, if there's support needed and such. But
We have and we can take them off the list. When you fill out an application, there is a volunteer training built into the application. So it talks about our standards and how to interact with kids and FERPA, the Privacy Act, that kind of thing is built into the application, and you have to initial each part. And then, yes, we've taken people off the cleared list because of issues, and that's principal discretion. It's also principal discretion who's cleared. So that's why we rely on the school to tell us who they want, to communicate with us who to clear, and why we don't background check unless we don't fingerprint unless we hear from the school. For parents? I mean, there's the training on the application.
there's information on there, and we hope that people, you're right, people, like I do on my documents, just sign at the bottom, but they are reading through, and maybe that would be a site-based thing. Yeah, I think, well, we want to be consistent, right, and then have same expectations for everybody across our campuses. So we'll take a look at it and see if that might be something that could be worth, having folks initial.
Yeah, thanks.
That'd be nice. Yeah, that would. Because, I mean, you're HR, so you know that I'm sure there's been an issue or two. We've seen it all. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Okay, so we'll finish up the meeting with some executive board updates. Here's our budget update for the month. The only changes are, again, our email, which is a monthly recurring expense, and we did have some grant income come in last month. It'll be on the YouTube if you need it, and I can always email a PDF. Every 2 years, our bylaws say we need to have a financial audit. We're working our way through this. The committee is getting close to finishing it up, and I've actually set a deadline that there will be a report released by next month's meeting. So now we have some upcoming events. Next month, the SPC general meeting is going to be on sister schools. It's right here in this room. It's an evening meeting. The start time I put in red because we're actually going to start we are going to start up 15 minutes later than we normally do. So this meeting will start at 6:15, Wednesday, April 17th, right here in this room. Tonight, we have a special event also happening right here in this room. at 6 o'clock. It's on teen driver safety. You do need to RSVP for this event, which I did not put on this slide. But if you're interested in attending, let me know and I'll connect you with the RSVP. But this is an RSVP event, so we can make sure we have enough seats for everybody. Okay, any announcements from our reps? No? All right, thank you so much for attending. And as always, we could use your support.